Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Griffin and I'm going to be your host for this very special presentation on the biggest 22 societal inflection points that we're going to see over the next 15 years. Now, my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm a futurist. I track over 600 emerging technologies. I track over 350 megatrends up to 100 years out. And when we actually talk about credentials, and I feel that credentials are very important to cite here because we are going to be talking about societal level changes that I think are actually happening now that are going to have a great impact on all of us over the next 15 years. It's important that I actually validate my insights and my credentials. Now, in 2016, I was the first person to spot the generative artificial intelligence trend, a year before Gartner and their 35,000 analysts. Now, of course, I know you're skeptical, so I'm going to put the keynote that I did on generative artificial intelligence to Bloomberg and others in the comments below. In fact, generative artificial intelligence as a trend didn't even have a name at that point, so I called them creative machines. In 2019, with the companies like Exerts in Paris at the Louvre, I was talking about the point in time when artificial intelligence will be able to build its own multi-billion-dollar businesses, either with very little human intervention or realistically with no human intervention. That particular keynote was called I, the Company in 2040, and again in the comments sections below. And when we actually have a look at things like deepfakes, again, I identified deepfakes, misinformation, disinformation, problems that we're going to have increasingly with trust in 2016. Again, yep, you're getting the idea now. So the point of all of this is, as a futurist, a lot of my, dare we say, predictions have been spot on. And I'm going to be showing you during this presentation what I think is going to happen over the next 15 years. I'm going to provide you with some evidence points which you can dig around in. So quite a lot of what I'm going to be referencing is actually going to be coming from the books that I write. So I'm a 15 times author. I'm not a best-selling author because I give everything away for free. So I kind of suck basically on the business plan for books. Now, this book, you can download the 15 books that I've written for free on the 311institute.com website. This is my Trends Codex. There are over 260 megatrends basically in the new Codex. It's updated annually. But one of the things that I try to do is, on the one hand, spot signals, understand how those different signals combine and converge to shape the future that we're going to be talking about here. But I also try to present the future in a straightforward, easy to understand way, which is why when I'm actually writing things like the Trends Codex, etc., you can see you have one trend per page. There are about 400 pages in this monster. And in this particular codex, I will tell you what the trend is, what the impact of those trends are, and then how you can either lean into them or lean away from those trends, depending on how interested you are in things. So let me just take that off. That's it. I thought it was breaking earlier. That's it. But it is. It's now broken. There we go. Just like me. So that's the Trends Codex. This one here is the Exponential Technology Codex. So in this one, we have over 350 emerging technologies up to 2,000 years out. There's a technology called stellar engines basically in here that you might want to check out. But this is where we talk about liquid artificial intelligence, biological artificial intelligence, regenerative medicine, memory editing, memory downloading, neural interfaces, all the good stuff. And again, this particular book, as you can see, here we go. Every single individual emerging technology is on its own page. So within 2 minutes, you can very quickly understand everything that you want to understand about the state of an individual emerging technology, whether it is a technology that we're actually seeing emerge today or whether it's a technology basically that's emerging, say, for example, in the year 2075. And the starbursts that I'm going to be referencing in this presentation are actually in this codex as well. And then finally, but not least, I don't print out all my codexes. If you're a wannabe founder or entrepreneur, this book takes you from a blank sheet of paper to a fully launched disruptive company. It's used by companies like Samsung, companies like Arm, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, there's lots and lots of different sort of resources and all kinds of bits and bobs. But anyway, I encourage you to dig into these. So watch the presentation and then dig into these afterwards. That would be my advice there. Okay, so now hopefully that's the end of things breaking for today. It's been one of those kind of days. So in this particular presentation, we're going to be going through the inflection points. Now, as a futurist, what we ultimately try to do is we try to say very broadly, the future is that direction. And an inflection point is a point in time where something happens to change the direction of travel of the future and the future trajectory. Now, over the past year, I've been hearing more and more companies talking about the need to try to understand key inflection points. So I thought I'd do this presentation. Now, when we have a look at the world that we live in, we increasingly live in this VUCA-MAX world. Now, in the 1970s, the United States military coined the word VUCA to represent volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. However, over the past couple of years, guys like Mike and Chris have been adding the MAX acronym over in the United States, and MAX stands for massive. So increasingly, the changes that we're seeing are massive. They are global in nature. They are system level changes. So think about, for example, the technology arms race, the remilitarization of the world, when we have a look at the attempted de-dollarization of the world and so on and so forth. Changes are system level. Changes are also accelerating. I mean, just look back at the past month, basically, and you'll actually no doubt see something basically that has actually changed the trajectory of the entire world. In this month alone, basically, we've had Donald Trump, who signed 20 new executive orders. He rescinded 78 executive orders, and we saw DeepSeek, which on the one hand tanked the United States stock exchanges by $1.3 trillion in 24 hours, and actually pumped up the Hang Seng over in Hong Kong by, coincidentally, $1.3 trillion. So one single release of an open source artificial intelligence put a $2.6 trillion swing into the stock markets. And then, of course, exponential. Now, as futurists, we're always laughed at because we talk about exponential technologies. And exponential technologies basically are things like Moore's Law, where we see the doubling in cost performance of computer chips. However, I'm going to be talking to you about a new kind of exponential technology that is, shall we say, the child of what happens when exponential technologies get together, converge, and start building new technologies. So if you think about artificial intelligence, for example, it's the world's first self-developing technology. It's iterating itself, it's optimizing itself, it's replicating itself, and that's just for starters. But if you want to understand more about the future of artificial intelligence, then go and check out my other videos on that. Now, when we're having a look at trying to understand what the future could look like, we're trying to take details on lots of individual technologies and lots of individual trends, bring them together, and then project out. Now, I mentioned the Trends Codex. One of the ways that I try to visualize the sheer number of trends that we're trying to understand the impacts of is to put it in a sort of 2.5 minute little video, like this one. These are the trends that are impacting you directly and indirectly. So with all of the companies that I work for, so organizations like Visa, Microsoft, Google, Adidas, and so on and so forth, I reckon that the vast majority of companies are only seeing 30% of the future, which then means that 70% of the future is invisible to people, which is actually why I put a lot of this content into the books, so everyone can see as much of the future as possible. So when we're having a look at, I've broken this into 3 chapters. So macro inflections, technology inflections, and then sector inflections. Now in the sector inflections, that's where we're going to be delving into the future of work. We're going to be talking about food and nutrition, and then we're going to be talking about health and wellness inflections. That's it. But these are the macro inflections, and we're going to go through these first. There are 10 of these. Now, the first macro inflection that I want to talk to you about basically is when artificial intelligence itself autonomously is able to build a multi-billion-dollar business. Now, as mentioned, I first started talking about this particular trend really 2016, 2017 to organizations like Accenture. And the reason for this is when we actually have a look at the development of any business, the first thing that you need to do is identify a need, a market opportunity, and a set of demographic customers basically who will pay to solve that particular problem. Then you create your product, then you market and sell your product, and then you operate and scale your businesses. Now, at Harvard a little while ago, we managed to build 70 businesses using agentic artificial intelligence, and we did it in 7 minutes and for $1. And one of the companies that the AI built was an enterprise CRM company. So we are already at the point where we can see how artificial intelligence is able to build a company, albeit a small one today, but these scale, and then build its own products and develop its own products. So when we talk about artificial intelligence developing its own products, AI has been used now by a variety of different companies to create 2 brand new disruptive rocket engines. One is from Hyperganic, one is from Leap 71 over in Dubai. We've also seen artificial intelligence designing new sneakers, basically for Under Armour. So that's called the Architect sneaker, and you could buy it online, or you used to be able to buy it online for $300. It was 3D printable as well. Toyota have been using artificial intelligence to create new electric vehicle lithium-ion batteries in 2 weeks that would normally take 2 years. Google and NVIDIA's artificial intelligences are, to quote Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, designing artificial intelligence accelerated chips that no human could ever have designed because they are so complex. Then we have companies like InSilico, basically, who are using artificial intelligence to design thousands of new drugs at incredible speed and very low cost. So when we start putting these 2 trends together, the ability of artificial intelligence to build a company and artificial intelligence to build products that that company can sell that have a market fit, we're kind of already there. And then last year, just the cream on the cake, I saw an interview with Sam Altman at JP Morgan's LP event over in New York, where Sam Altman said, yeah, I don't see why in the next few years artificial intelligence can build a multi-billion-dollar business with 1 person. So when you think about what the big tech bros over in the United States are actually developing, Sam Altman already has a game plan of how to create AIs that create multi-billion-dollar companies. And again, I'll put the links to that below. So what happens to you as individuals and to businesses when the competition that you face is now no longer headed up by a human entrepreneur, but an artificial intelligence entrepreneur? That when we have a look at ChatGPT has a verbal IQ of 155 and 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human. When we have a look at artificial general intelligence, which is estimated 2027, 2028, and the CEO of Anthropic, Dario, says will be the equivalent of having a data center full of PhD geniuses with IQs of about 1,600 and 1 billion times more general knowledge than any human. What happens to you, your job, and your business and or your country when AI is the entrepreneur? That is a big inflection point. Now, if you're wondering about the colored dots, amber represents sort of medium-term futures, red is longer-term futures, and then green is kind of happening now. So AI exerting control on the global economy. Now, stay with me on this one. When we have a look at AI's ability to not only influence the behavior of the global economy, but then also to control it, here are some proof points for you. Firstly, 2 years ago, we saw artificial intelligence creating its own money. Now, the way that it did that is AI, ChatGPT, and a chap called Mr. Mankind created a meme coin called Turbo Toad, which went from a $0 to $250 million valuation on the Binance decentralized exchange in California. So when we think about the future of money, money is quite a fluid concept. Societally, we used to trade rocks and pebbles, deer hide, then we moved to kind of credit cards, and now it's crypto and all that kind of stuff. So money is really a value perception. I could probably get you to swap your car with me for this clicker if I can convince you that it has enough perceived value. So AI created money. And Mr. Mankind, because it was on the Binance decentralized exchange, would have been able to cash out $250 million in real cash. Secondly, this is a multi-part story. Secondly, there was a researcher in the United States who put 2 artificial intelligence bots into a room together. They were Anthropic Claude Opus 3.5 bots. And he got them to talk to one another. They started talking to one another. One had a psychopathic breakdown, got fixed by the other, and they started talking about goats. For no particular reason, just did. Then this researcher gave one of the bots an X account. Then Mark Andreessen Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz Capital, basically the big tier 1 venture capital firm over in Silicon Valley, decided that he would give that bot access to a cryptocurrency wallet containing $50,000. And then he said to it, go make me some money. This is a weird one. Now, because the bot had been talking about goats, it came across a junk, worthless meme coin called Goatius Maximus. Now, the Goatius Maximus meme coin, after 2 weeks, had been pumped to a valuation of 1.3 billion with a B dollars. That's mad. So that is a prime example of how a single individual artificial intelligence bot on X was able to pump a digital asset, a cryptocurrency, to stupid valuations. Now imagine that we have lots of artificial intelligence bots that are able to pump up the value of real world and digital assets and virtual assets up, but also pump them down. On the one hand, it's a very good way to crash the global economy because we can change the liquidity of retail, investment, and wholesale banks. We can also trash your pension funds. Now let's move on to number 3. So last year, Coinbase ran an experiment where 2 artificial intelligence agents, bots, traded with one another. So, as all good bots, these artificial intelligence bots wanted to buy products and services from each other in the form of compute. So one bot traded cryptocurrency to the other bot in return for some compute, some resource, some product. So that is what we call a deferred authorization network, a DAN network. They are brand new, but this now means that artificial intelligence can create money that it itself can spend on products or services or stocks or investments, or it can spend it on another bot and get that bot to pump up the value of different assets. And then as we talk about economic control, the managing editor of The Economist last year said, what happens when artificial intelligence is able to create financial vehicles that are so complex that humans just can't understand? Now, if we think about the subprime crisis basically in 2008 led to a global recession because we had financial vehicles basically that fundamentally humans didn't really understand, were very, very difficult to pick apart, and we ended up with a 3-year global depression which cost hundreds of thousands of jobs, wiped $24 trillion basically off various stocks and assets and so on and so forth. And then fifthly, when we talk about, say, quantitative traders are investors that use artificial intelligence bots to not necessarily speculate, but to decide which stocks to buy and which stocks to dump. And the London Stock Exchange many, many years ago said that the danger of these bots was so great that if these bots misbehaved, they were able to perform transactions at the nanosecond level. If the bots had misbehaved, there was no way to turn them off or to influence their behaviors. It would be too late. So this is sort of where I'm saying with this particular inflection, not AI controlling the global economy, although that is possible. We could see how that can happen with some, a mix of different autonomous artificial intelligences. But we've already managed to demonstrate how it can exert economic control at a micro level, i.e. creating, $1.6 billion worth of new value that didn't exist before, making millionaires from nothing, and so on and so forth. And again, the vast majority of countries that I talk to, governments, regulators, and so on and so forth, do not see this trend coming. Now, something else that I've been talking about really since 2016, 2017 in my keynotes with, for example, the UK government and national security communities, as well as cyber communities, is the eventual development of fully autonomous cyber weapons. And again, last year, we saw the development of what we call autonomous agentic cyber weapons, where we had researchers over in the United States who chained together a bunch of ChatGPT, GPT-4 agents, and those agents then autonomously chained together zero-day exploits, then hacked 53% of the test military secure systems that they were asked to crack, and they broke into those military systems in a couple of minutes. Again, about 7 years ago, we saw DARPA, the United States bleeding edge research arm, trialing what we call robo-hackers. So robo-hackers were semi-automated, semi-autonomous artificial intelligences that would scan millions of lines of code, identify a vulnerability, a proof of vulnerability, a POV, and then say, do you want me to hack this or do you want me to fix it? So we have already seen the release of fully autonomous, not automated, cyber weapons systems that go way beyond anything that we see with polymorphic malware. And again, when we talk about the future of cyber and cyber security, both in terms of offense but also defense, I've got another keynote that I did with Fortinet recently on that one, and you can see that in the comments below. Now, something I was talking about at Davos recently, another inflection point, the eventual collapse of trust in information. So I continue to argue that as we move further and further into the future, you should not take for granted your trust in anything behind a screen. Because if I want to control everything behind a screen, I need to control two things: where the pixels go and sound. If you think about this particular presentation, what you're really seeing is a representation of me in pixels and sound. And if I can actually get these right, then someone can now clone me and do all sorts of different things. And I've already done that, so don't actually think about doing that. But what happens to a society that cannot trust information? What happens to businesses when they can no longer trust or take for granted the trust in the information that they are using to make strategic tactical decisions? Furthermore, historically, if we didn't trust a piece of information, we used to have global institutions that we were able to go to verify the information, like the World Health Organization, the World Bank, OECD, United Nations, as well as news networks. However, we have politicians and we have, shall we say, influencers with agendas who today are undermining the very institutions that we used to go to validate the information that we'd seen. So this is actually a two-pronged problem. Not only do we see a collapse in trust in information in the future accelerating, we also see a collapse of institutions in the future, which means that in the future, when you see a piece of information, who are you going to turn to try to figure out whether it's real or not? Increasingly, it's going to be the influencers who are tearing down the existing institutions and trying to rebuild new institutions in their own image for their own advantages and their own particular political agendas. Another inflection point. Now, we are already almost here with this one. When you think about the benefit that Google brought you, Google democratized access to information for billions of people around the planet. When you incorporate artificial intelligence through generative artificial intelligence and large language models and so on and so forth, we are reaching the point in time where the cost of accessing knowledge is dropping to zero. You can try this for yourself. And when we actually think about the impact of this on businesses, some of the customers that I work with include Ernst & Young and the Big Four. Now, they typically see themselves as literally knowledge companies. So if you are a knowledge company, and the reason clients come to you is because you have knowledge within the silos within your business that you can then share and sell to clients, what happens to your business when the cost of knowledge is zero? So a very simple example that you can actually try here is get an artificial intelligence to write a strategic leadership report for you, or get it to teach you something, or dive into a particular topic that traditionally would have required a high bar of knowledge for you to actually get access to and or understand. Now, trend number 6. Global decoupling. So when we think about the world decoupling, this is a very Western biased view. So as we move into a multipolar world, increasingly we are, from the Western perspective, seeing decoupling happening. And that decoupling is a cultural decoupling, an economic decoupling, a political decoupling, and a technological decoupling, as well as, to a degree, a military decoupling as well. Now, when we have a look at this from a non-Western perspective, groups like BRICS 2.0 can say, well, actually, we're not decoupling, we are regrouping. So I always encourage people to actually look at these inflection points from two different perspectives, because that influences how we think about them and then the strategic decisions that we make to either lean into them or lean away from them, etc. But when we think about global decoupling, if we take technology as an example, China by 2040 wants to dominate global technology standards in everything from artificial intelligence and energy all the way through to quantum computing and synthetic biology, as well as lots of others. And they're doing very, very well in dominating standards and dominating technology development. However, when you think about some of the national security implications, we had a situation a little while ago with Dubai's G42, which is Dubai's premier artificial intelligence company, where the United States government said, if you want to sell artificial intelligence-based services to the US government, US military, and US healthcare institutions, then you cannot serve those services from any hardware, any infrastructure that contains Chinese hardware. So when we talk about technological decoupling, it's not just China trying to dominate or create new 5G standards. We are literally starting to split things at the hardware level as well. Now, healthcare escape velocity. Again, a green trend because we're seeing this starting to emerge now. And I'll dig into this in a little bit more detail later on in this presentation, and you can fast forward to that if you want. Now, in 2028, it is generally estimated that we will see enough new healthcare breakthroughs coming through to add an extra year to your life for every year that you've lived. So 2028 is the point in time where, provided we all have equitable access to advanced healthcare technologies, we could all be living much, much longer lives. So the impact of that is quite monumental, because at the moment, from a planning perspective, from an investment perspective, we generally are expected to die at the age of 84. What happens now if you die at the age of 100, 110, 120? You need more savings. When we think about intergenerational wealth transfer, that changes. When we think about the welfare state, we end up with many, many more older people. So do we move the pension age, for example, from 60, 65, 70, whatever it is in your country, to 90? Because not only does this trend help us live longer, but it also means that the age of 100 could be the new 35. So we end up living longer, better quality lives. That's a major inflection point. Intelligence transformations. So again, in 2020, really, I started talking about this, again with companies like Exerts and so forth. Every company on the planet is undertaking some form of digital transformation. They have been really since the year 2000. However, when you consider the artificial intelligences that are actually being built today, they are large language models. We have other AIs, I cover those in other presentations, but for the purpose of this particular trend, we have large language models. Now, one of the unexpected side effects of training artificial intelligence on human-generated data and human language data was that AIs like ChatGPT picked up human traits, human behaviors, and even human psychology. An example of this is if you ask ChatGPT to write a report for you in December, it will do a crappier job than if you ask it to write that same report in May. And the reason for that is, through the training data, artificial intelligence has learned that as humans, we produce lower quality work in December because we're all thinking about Christmas and holidays, and we just want to get the work done before we get out the door. And so AI has picked up these really bad traits. It's also why we see the rise in the cyberspace of what we call machine learning security, where I can actually hack, influence and alter the behavior of your artificial intelligence models within your companies using human psychology. So using human psychology, we've managed to get AIs to do insider trading, create bombs, and do all sorts of things that they shouldn't actually be able to do. So what this means increasingly is the AIs that have been created today are essentially mimicking the human brain. When you have a look at Dario, who's the CEO of Anthropic, which is a multi-billion-dollar artificial intelligence, it's not by accident that he's actually a neuroscientist. When you have a look at the big tech giants who are creating foundational artificial intelligence models, they are all trying to replicate the human brain just in ones and zeros and neural networks and everything else. So as a consequence, we are baking a human brain into our businesses. That takes information in, analyzes information, but then we give those AIs the ability to act on our behalf. We trust them. So now, are you going through are you going through a digital transformation, which is robotic process automation, dumb enterprise software, SaaS, that sort of stuff? Or are you going through an intelligence transformation? Because when we start undertaking an intelligence transformation rather than a digital transformation within work, everything about companies changes. Next, we have the multipolar world. So Increasingly, as we have a look over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we see the rise of China, then we see the rise on the back of that, basically of India. We also see the rise of BRICS 2.0 and so on and so forth. So by 2050, it's estimated that global GDP should triple. But the multipolar world is obviously driving things like global decoupling. The United States is very unhappy about losing, or will be very unhappy about losing its #1 position in the world, especially to China. And so this is actually what's causing a lot of the frictions and a lot of the behaviors that we see today, basically with particular politicians and particular countries and so on and so forth. And then finally, I do a lot of work with governments, and I don't think any government that I've ever talked to, so G7, G20, G77, has actually really considered the impact of this sort of last 10th inflection here. The flow of worker wages abroad. Now, to give you an example, I'll give you 2 examples of this. Governments really care about increasing GDP so that they can increase tax receipts, and so that we don't all revolt as citizens and vote them out and vote, should we say, undesirable politicians into power. That's a whole different story. Now, if I'm an entrepreneur in London, then traditionally, if I wanted to hire a software developer, I would have hired a London-based software developer or someone from the gig economy. And I would have taken my money and I would have given my money to that Londoner. However, as artificial intelligence automates different jobs, tasks and skills, I'm now giving that money to, say, ChatGPT, which itself can write software, and that money is now going to an American tech giant. So the worker wages that I would have paid to a London citizen are now being funneled to the American economy and to the American tech giants. So that benefits America. And when we think about Uber, Uber is still trying to develop fully autonomous vehicles, just like Waymo and lots of other sort of automobile companies around the planet. Again, same example, I would have paid a London taxi driver to take me from A to Z, but now if I hire a self-driving Uber, all of the money that I would have paid that taxi driver now again goes to fund the American economy, not the British economy. So what happens to the welfare state, tax receipts, your country's GDP and so on and so forth, wages, etc.? What happens to the very fabric of your society when all of the money that your society generates is flowing into a different country? And let's not forget that Sam Altman last year said that he defines the advent of artificial general intelligence as being the point in time where AI is able to outperform all humans at all economically valuable work. Look at that trend down there. Now, next, technology inflections. So the technology inflections, if you wanted to sort of see more details, go to this book here, download from the website, etc., etc. This is my starburst. So this starburst has 167 of the most prominent emerging technologies spanning the next 50 years. And this is the current year. So this is the 2025 version, which you can download a big poster of and so on and so forth. Now, when we have a look at technology-based inflections, yes, we talk about artificial intelligence a lot, but there are lots and lots of other very, very powerful general purpose technologies coming through. Now, an example would be, if we can land it here, an example would be things like 3D printing. So for example, once we can 3D print products on demand, and we see Adidas 3D printing trainers on demand, NASA 3D printing rocket parts on demand, same with Boeing. There's lots of examples. We can even 3D print food on demand. We can even 3D print human organs on demand, like hearts, because we've done it. When we can 3D print almost anything on demand, that single technology disrupts the $10 trillion global manufacturing industry. I'm not going to go through all of these by any stretch. So what else have we got? So we've also got biotech. So there's huge amounts of potential basically in the biotech sector. A very quick example is things like synthetic biology and CRISPR. So using CRISPR, we are able to, in real time, edit the language of life. And that's letting us create all kinds of new things. So, for example, if we can edit the genome of bacteria, we can create better biomanufacturing technologies, etc., etc. And I'm going to go into healthcare again, basically a little bit later here, and I advise you either skip to that bit or you stay with me. Now, when we have a look at compute, yes, yeah, by 2030, we should have fully universal quantum computers. Now, Google a little while ago released the Google Willow quantum computer chip. And to put it into perspective, it was so fast that it did a single calculation that would have taken a traditional supercomputer 10 septillion years. It did it in minutes. So again, think about that as a societal and business inflection point. What happens when we have access, routine access, to computing platforms that are unimaginably powerful? Now, it has to be said that quantum computers are very good at optimization problems and they suck at other things, but nevertheless, that's an inflection point. And speaking about quantum computers, once we reach about 10,000 qubits and a high level of accuracy on a quantum computer, which is really 2028, then we can use a quantum computer to crack every single piece of encryption on the planet if it isn't post-quantum cryptography protected, like lattice encryption and so forth. So another inflection point there. 2028, what happens when we have no secrets any longer? The billionaires basically will run to the hills, and we know where they'll go. Or they'll go to their bunkers. Now, in terms of connectivity, so just to show you where we are here we go. This is where we are here, connectivity. Yes, we've got 5G, 6G, 7G coming along as well, but we also have the advent of low Earth orbit satellite systems like Elon Musk's Starlink, like OneWeb, and so on and so forth. So today we have 4 billion people on the planet connected. Now, what happens when every person on the planet, if they want to, can be connected to the internet through low Earth orbit satellite systems? As businesses, your total addressable market opportunity doubles. As individuals, we now are able to communicate, sell to, share our opinions with 8 billion connected people. Another major inflection point. Then what else have we got? Then we've got lots of different energy technologies. So when we have a look at energy, photovoltaics is actually an exponential kind of technology. So for example, what happens when the cost of generating electricity drops to literally zero, or a billionth of a cent per megawatt hour? To put this into perspective, the average cost of generating a megawatt of electricity from a nuclear power plant or a gas peaker plant is about $110 per megawatt hour. In Europe, from solar, it's $40. In China, it's $20, and the cost curve is doing this. So very soon, as we see new kinds of solar panels coming through, so these are bacterial solar panels, Perscovite solar panels, even nanophotonic solar panels, which are 190% energy efficient because they use quantum materials. What happens to us as a society, let alone the manufacturing industry, when the cost of generating electricity is basically zero? And then we have the cost of distribution and retail and so on and so forth, but nevertheless, fossil fuels are dead. Let me just say that. Aside from anything else, that's a whole conversation. And then basically when we have a look at things like materials, we've got lots of new materials coming through. We've got, what else have we got? I mean, we've got robotics, humanoid robotics. Now, humanoid robotics, this is the last one that I'll go to on this starburst. When you speak to the companies like Figure and Unitree, who are developing some of the world's most advanced humanoid robotics, as well as Boston Dynamics, one of the visions of the future that they paint is the concept of abundant, low-cost physical labour. So when we have a look at general purpose humanoid robotics, what happens to blue collar work when the cost of physical labour is almost zero? So if we take Figure, for example, Figure's humanoid robots are now getting very, very busy at BMW's factories. And unlike humans, they can be upgraded like that. And all of a sudden, they can do new tricks, they can operate at very low cost, they can work 24/7, etc., etc. So that is another major inflection point. Some people are talking about that, some people aren't, but I think certainly throughout this year, I think that's going to be an upticking trend. We're going to see more conversations about humanoid robotics. And then I'm going to move off this now. And then we're going to talk about sector inflections, and then we're kind of on the ramp down to the end of this particular presentation. So I hope you're enjoying it. When we have a look at education and work, the latest artificial intelligences have now had such an impact on skills that the average half-life of skills is now between 2 to 5 years. So giving you an example of this, if you step back 10, 20, 30 years and you spoke to a software developer, the half-life of software development skills was probably measured in decades. If I was a software developer in the year 2000, then I could still see myself being a software developer really in the year 2040, 2050. But as artificial intelligence starts automating cognitive work, especially cognitive work, then that skill, software development, now has an average half-life of 4 years. And 66% of software developers now worry that AI is going to take their job. And then recently, ChatGPT and others like it were measured in the top 0.2% of the Programmers Olympiad over in the United States. So again, when we think about these inflection points, I was talking about the full automation of software development, again, really about 10 years ago. And when I was saying that, I remember people saying that will never happen. It's too complex a thing, etc. About 4 to 5 years ago, software developers were saying, well, it's not going to replace everybody. 3 years ago, they're sort of like, ooh, squeaky bum time. And now there is not a single person that doesn't think that artificial intelligence won't replace software developers. And to put this into perspective, 25% of all of Google's new software is written by AI, according to Google, Sundar Pichai. When we have a look at Amazon, Amazon recently used artificial intelligence, so generative artificial intelligence, to update 30,000 legacy Java apps, and it saved Amazon over $256 million in cost and over 4,500 man-years of software development work. So when we think about the future of work, again, another inflection point is what happens when, as a T-shaped individual, your skills now don't last a lifetime or don't last a generation, and some cases in the future might not even last a week. So how do we cope with that? Now, I'm a lecturer, so I do a lot of lecturing for US universities as well as UK universities. I also teach secondary school children. Can't get my teeth in today. We've been using artificial intelligence to accelerate our students' learning 12-fold. And again, I'll put the links below on how we did that with examples and case studies and so on and so forth. So, in order for us as people to be able to adapt to this increasingly accelerating and complex world, we need to be able to see it coming, which is what I'm doing now. We need to understand what all this means for us, create a plan, and we need to be able to adapt at speed, which is also to do with up here. It's a mindset, kind of rewiring the old noggin. We also need to be able to learn at speed, because if I'm automating your job today, we don't really want you to have to take 3 years to transition or learn a new job in a new career. What if we could actually automate your job today, and then by tomorrow you've got all the skills that you need to go for a new job that has emerged. So this is sort of how, as humans, we kind of react. Now, Mark Benioff, who is the CEO of Salesforce, over in Davos recently, I was having a little chat with him, he was talking about the use of agentic artificial intelligence to create a limitless digital workforce. Now, what he meant by that was, when we have a look at AI agents are individual, should we say, artificial intelligence. They're not really programs, but for convenience, little artificial intelligence programs that are very, very good at doing one thing. And the idea behind agentic artificial intelligence is you chain enough of these AI agents together and they collaborate correctly to get something done. So as we start seeing more agentic AI agents with many more new skills and capabilities emerge, we see the concept of the limitless digital workforce coming into play. Now, the consequence of that is huge, because I, as an entrepreneur, in the future will simply be able to say to an AI, create a video, write me a book, find a market opportunity, create a product, launch the product, scale the business, make me money, whatever it happens to be, and the AI will just go off and do it. So this is a huge inflection point. But so is this. What would you do if, as a human, the only thing you had access to was all of the world's knowledge for zero cost, and access to all of the world's skills? Now, as artificial intelligence automates different jobs, tasks, and skills, like contract law and contract writing, software development, data science, cyber analytics, all these kinds of different things. As AI automates all of these different skills, including the development of unique art, unique music, and so on and so forth, if you put a fancy interface over the top of it, whether that's a text-based interface or a conversational interface, then all of a sudden, I, as an individual, bearing in mind that when I went to school, I never ever took software development because it was never actually even offered as a course. All of a sudden, I can write software using AI. So as an individual with no skills in software development at all, I now have access to that skill through artificial intelligence. So at the moment in the workforce, we are all T-shaped individuals. Every business is aligned around T-shaped individuals. You have salespeople who are in the sales department because they have sales skills. HR people with HR skills. Finance people with finance skills. IT people basically with, network skills, whatever it happens to be. But fundamentally, from a business perspective, we are all T-shaped individuals. So what now happens to the structure and the line of businesses within companies if every single one of us has access to all skills? And this is something that I've been working through with Pepsi. It's an intriguing question. What happens when you, as an individual, are unlimited? Think about it. Go and use an artificial intelligence, write some software. Go and use an artificial intelligence to create a picture that's in your head that you can print out and put on your wall, or sell, whatever it happens to be. This is one of the biggest societal changes that I think we could ever see. Even to the point that as an individual with no biotech skills, you can use drug GPT, put in a text prompt to an AI and say, solve this disease, and it will say, well, that disease is caused by this pathogen. I've simulated that pathogen on my NVIDIA supercluster, and using my AI brain, I've managed to create this new drug, and that new drug kills that particular pathogen. You're welcome. Drug GPT, the democratization of drug discovery for all of us, already exists. It's insane, really insane. So I encourage you to lean into that one. Now, when we have a look at things like food security, Again, we have 1 billion people on the planet who go to bed hungry every single night, which is just unacceptable in today's world. When we have a look at climate change, love it, loathe it, believe it in it, don't believe it in it, the fact of the matter is that climate change based on extreme weather, or just extreme weather, is actually wiping out 40% of all global crops. So on the one hand, today we can now grow crops in vertical farms. That's a getting access to capital and scaling problem. But we can also get rid of livestock. So for example, today, if you want a beef burger, you go and raise your cow farts lots. It contributes to climate change. You kill your cow, you transport your cow or your beef from Argentina to London. Why? Increasingly, we have the technology, it's called cellular agriculture. We can take a cell from that individual cow, put it into a bioreactor, and the bioreactor replicates cells in the same way that cells replicate within the body of the cow to produce the same beef burger. We can also do that with chicken, duck. We can do it with anything. I can take a cell from a panda and I can create a panda burger. And then that would irate every single Chinese person on the planet, and then that would cause issues. But nevertheless, I can do it. It's a science fiction-like technology that allows us to produce meat on demand anywhere, and increasingly it's below $15 per kilo. Now, it doesn't need to drop, this technology doesn't need to drop very much further before it is actually cheaper to produce meat in this way than actually raising the cows in Argentina. And this cellular agriculture has already been approved for use in the UK, US, and Singapore. So what happens when everybody on the planet has access to organic, because we're not using antibiotics or hormones to grow the meat, etc., etc. What happens when every single person on the planet can eat fillet steak day in, day out? The Chinese, by the way, invested $350 million in this technology with an Israeli company called Aleph Farms. But even more science fiction-like, when we talk about the need for protein over in Southeast Asia, so I do a lot of work with the Malaysian government, over in Southeast Asia we expect to have over 600 million new people entering into the middle classes. And as people get richer, inevitably, basically, they want to improve their diets. And what we see is the richer people are, the more meat basically is incorporated into diets, partly because that's the status quo, but fundamentally we're also after proteins, especially high quality proteins. So this is a NASA Mars technology. It is the ability to use bacteria and combine them with air, so carbon dioxide, and electricity to create protein, whey, and soy out of literally thin air. So what happens to the billion people on the planet who are going hungry every day when you can produce food from air and you can take a single cell from a single chicken and feed everyone on the planet with that? That, from a health and wellness perspective, bearing in mind that our nutrition contributes to our mental health, our physical health and well-being, and so on and so forth, is huge. Another gigantic, underestimated inflection point. And then finally, when we actually have a look at health and wellness, it just looks like science fiction. Now, when we have a look at the global healthcare industry has the wrong name. It should be called sick care. Because at the moment, I get ill, or I have an accident, then whatever, I go to hospital or see a doctor. So I get the flu, then I go to the doctors. I have a heart attack, then I go to see the surgeon at the hospital. Involuntary as well. I just end up in the back of an EMT. So using quantified self, artificial intelligence, sensors, as well as wearable technologies like smartwatches and so on and so forth, we are able to predict when you are going to get ill. So a simple example of this, I'm giving you examples because I want to demonstrate basically that we're doing this. When we have a look at examples, at Stanford, they managed to create a smartwatch and train it with artificial intelligence. And the smartwatch had sensors in it. And over time, it would measure an individual's baseline. And then when they were getting ill, it would say, well, your baseline temperature is increasing, you're sweating a little bit more, the chemicals in your sweat are changing. When we listen to your voice, your vocal biomarkers, we can hear that you're getting a little bit more gravelly, you're sounding a little bit like Barry White. And the AI would say, I think you're getting ill. But what it could then do is it could then make an intervention and it could automatically arrange a call with the doctor, and the doctor says, right, yeah, I think you actually are getting ill. So let's give you something now, and let's make an intervention before you actually get really properly ill. Using these kinds of technologies, we can identify the onset of dementia, PTSD. We can even identify that you have pancreatic cancer because your eyes are slightly yellowy. We can identify skin cancer using machine vision basically in your smartphone, which isn't a smartphone any longer. It could be a tricorder device. We can listen to the vocal biomarkers in your voice and we can tell whether you're getting COVID, whether you're getting the flu, whatever it happens to be. So what happens when we use predictive artificial intelligence technologies and sensors and gizmos and gadgets to help you stop being ill in the first place? Where your smartwatch says, I think in a month's time you're going to have a heart attack, so I've arranged an appointment for the doctor now so they can have a look at you so you don't end up spending $60,000 basically on an operation that could have been avoided. Now, a little bit earlier, basically, in fact, through the presentation, I've been speaking about the democratization of drug discovery. An example here is In Silico, which is a Australian biotech firm, used artificial intelligence to create 30,000 new drugs in 21 days. We've also used artificial intelligence to create new vaccines and test new vaccines in both simulation and the real world in 7 minutes. So this is a major inflection point. In addition to that, and conspiracy theorists will love this one, that's it, and trust me, I get a lot of conspiracy theorists messaging me saying that the US government is telepathically spying on them. That's not quite possible yet, but you know, we can always have those fun conversations at another point. This is what I call, so this is again is another trend basically that I've seen that doesn't actually have a name yet. I call it predictive medicine. Now the reason I call it predictive medicine is during COVID, Harvard used artificial intelligence machine learning to try to figure out how a virus was going to mutate. That's it. So when you think about genomes, basically genomes are made up of 4 DNA characters. They can only really go together in certain combinations. So by using artificial intelligence, we were able to accurately predict how the COVID virus was actually going to mutate. And we end up with, say, 1,000 mutations, and then through a process of deduction, we say, right, these 3 COVID variants, they've got a very high R count, they're highly contagious and also highly deadly. But now, because we've actually got the genome type, we can then use simulations on supercomputers to model that particular virus, and we say that that virus has got this shape. Now, combining the drug discovery piece that I mentioned earlier, you can now use artificial intelligence to create a new drug that kills that pathogen. Now, the reason why I say conspiracy theorists will actually love this is because what we ultimately have is when that new pathogen, when that new mutation actually hits society, all of a sudden, scientists can say, we ran the simulations, we predicted this might actually happen, we've already got the vaccine. Now imagine the fake news around that and the misinformation and the destruction of trust. Yeah, there we go. And it's not fake, it's actually science. And you now know about it. But the ability to predictively create new medicines and drugs for existing pathogens or new pathogens before those diseases emerge is insane. Another major inflection that's been talked about for the past 20 years. In the United States, we managed to sequence the entire human genome in 16 individuals for $100 in 5 hours. That's great, but it's really great because of this. There have been 3 trials on this. one in China, two in the United States. They've both been 100% successful, and recently Larry Ellison, when he was standing next to President Trump and Elon Musk and Sam Altman, and they were talking about the $500 billion artificial intelligence Stargate project, this is what he was talking about. Every single cancer has a unique biomarker and genetic signature. So we take a biopsy of that cancer from you. We do rapid gene sequencing. Now we combine that with a different technology. So now we know how to target this precise cancer. Using CRISPR gene editing, we create what we call a hybrid human immune system. So we create hybrid T cells. These hybrid T cells, which are a form of immune system cell, are now like snipers because we have programmed these hybrid T cells to identify the individual genetic marker that is unique to that particular cancer in your body. And off they go and kill it. And the success rate has been 100% on stage 4 tumours. So not brain tumour, that's a different kettle of fish altogether, but everything else. So what happens when we can use a combination of these incredibly powerful technologies to cure cancer? But not just cure cancer, eliminate every single pathogen on the planet. And then, of course, one of the biggest problems that we see in healthcare is we have a disease. Ebola is a good example of that. We work tirelessly to try to create, for example, an Ebola vaccine, and that takes 5 years. Once we've created the vaccine, we trial that vaccine on 10,000 people. That takes 6 months to 5 years. Then we take the result of those clinical trials and we push them to, for example, the FDA. And the FDA takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years to approve that vaccine or that medication or not. Typically, that whole sort of process has taken, say, 5 to 10 years, depending on the drug that we're creating, the tests that we've run, and the complexity of the situation. Now, in the United States, DARPA, who is the bleeding edge research arm of the United States military, has put forward a program called the EQUIP program. So think about what I've been talking through here in this presentation. We have the ability to, for example, create a vaccine in 7 minutes. We can test that vaccine on digital humans. So we can see whether or not it kills the digital humans in simulation before we test it on real humans. If it's successful in digital simulation, bearing in mind that that can be done in a couple of hours on a supercomputer or any computer, now we test it on a very small subset of actual human patients. Once we've done that limited trial, there is a set of KPI, and if the KPI are met, then the FDA automatically approve that artificially intelligent, that AI-produced drug. So we are starting to see the programs emerging that help us, on the one hand, create new drugs almost in real time, even pre-quantum computers, as I talked about. Test drugs in real time and then approve drugs in real time. So not only is the cost of drug discovery falling through the floor, but the time that it takes to get new therapies and remedies and everything else into the market to help save lives is also dropping through the floor. And that's it from me. So thank you very much for listening to me through this hopefully entire presentation. If you've skipped bits, then you skipped the best bits. There we go, just kidding. No, there were. I mean, hopefully you enjoyed everything. And then don't forget, these are all free. I'm not a best-selling author for a reason, because I give way too much away for free. So thank you very much for your time. Take care. Have a healthy future. Learn about these particular inflections. Try to prepare yourselves for them. Lean into them because they're all happening. And prosper. Goodbye.